The Galactic Academy of Interstellar Sciences floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. It was the biggest school in the known universe. Students from 47 different alien species came here to learn. They studied science, history, and the secrets of the stars. The academy was a place of wonder and knowledge. Among the thousands of alien students, there was only one human. His name was Kang Do-yoon, and he was 23 years old. He had arrived at the academy 6 months ago, sent by Earth's government as part of a new treaty. Humans were new to space travel. They had only been exploring the stars for 200 years. Most alien species had been doing it for thousands. Do-hyun stood at the window of his small room and looked out at the stars. Back on Earth, he had been a top student. He had worked hard his whole life to earn this chance. But here, he was nothing. Less than nothing. He was the strange creature that everyone whispered about. The Valorians were the most powerful species at the academy. Their bodies were made of living crystal that shifted colors with their emotions. They could read minds and speak without words. They looked at Do-yoon the same way a person might look at an insect that had wandered into their kitchen. Not with hate, but with a kind of confused disgust. Why was it here? What could it possibly want? Do-hyun had learned very quickly that showing emotion was a mistake. On his 3rd day at the academy, he had smiled at a group of Valorian students. They had stopped walking and stared at him like he had done something offensive. Later, he learned that showing teeth was considered a threat display among many species. After that, he kept his face still and his eyes down. The thorax were worse in a different way. They were giant insect creatures, each one standing 3 meters tall with hard shells and sharp claws. They were warriors, bred for fighting over countless generations. When they looked at Do-hyun, they did not see a fellow student. They saw prey, something weak and soft that they could crush with one hand. One thorax named Grick had made a habit of blocking Do-hyun's path in the corridors. The massive creature would stand there, clicking its mandibles, waiting to see if the human would challenge it or run away. Do-hyun always walked around, keeping his eyes forward. Grick would make a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. The cafeteria was the hardest place. Do-hyun had to eat alone every day at a small table in the corner. The food dispensers had a limited selection of human-safe options, and they all tasted like cardboard. He missed his grandmother's cooking more than he could say. Before he left Earth, his grandmother Yoonji had packed him a bag of dried persimmons. She had grown the persimmon tree herself, in the small garden behind their apartment building in Busan. Do-hyun rationed those persimmons carefully. He allowed himself 1 small piece each week. There were only a few left now. When they were gone, he would have nothing left of home but memories. The classes were difficult, but not impossible. Do-hyun discovered that humans were not as stupid as the aliens believed. His mind worked differently than theirs. That was true. The Valorians could process information directly through their crystal structures. The thorax had perfect memory for combat tactics. But humans had something else. They could make connections that others missed. They could look at 2 separate ideas and see how they fit together. Professor Kath was a Valorian who taught xenobiology. She was old. Her crystal body faded to a pale blue, and she had been teaching for 300 years. On the first day of class, she had looked at Do-hyun with open curiosity. "The human specimen," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "Tell me, creature, why do you bother? Your species lives for less than a century. By the time you learn anything useful, you will be dead." The other students had laughed. Do-hyun felt his face grow hot, but he kept his voice steady. "Maybe that is why we try harder," he said. "We do not have time to waste." Professor Kath had tilted her head, considering this. She did not laugh like the others. After class, she called him to her desk and gave him extra reading materials. It was not kindness, exactly. More like the interest a scientist shows in an unusual specimen. But it was something. Do-hyun spent most of his free time in the Academy's library. It was a vast space filled with knowledge from every corner of the galaxy. He read everything he could find about the different species, their histories, their customs, their weaknesses. Knowledge was the only weapon he had. He also discovered the lower gardens. Most students had forgotten they existed. They were in an old section of the station, where bioluminescent plants from 100 worlds grew wild and tangled. The lights there were soft and colored, and the air smelled sweet and strange. Do-hyun went there when the loneliness became too heavy. He would sit among the glowing flowers and remember Earth. He would remember the sound of rain on the roof of his family's apartment. He would remember his younger sister Yuna laughing at his jokes. He would remember his mother's voice and his father's strong hands. He would remember everything he had left behind. Sometimes he wondered if coming here had been a mistake. The treaty between Earth and the Confederacy was fragile. Humans needed allies among the stars, and the Academy was supposed to build bridges between species. But no bridges were being built. Do-hyun was just a curiosity, a strange animal that the aliens tolerated because they had to. Academy Director Vethmora watched everything that happened in her school. She was a tall Valorian with deep purple crystals that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her office was at the top of the highest tower, and from there she could see every corridor, every classroom, every student. She watched the human with mild interest. He adapted, she noted. He was quiet and careful. He studied hard and caused no trouble. But he was still just a human. His species was young and weak. They had no telepathy, no natural weapons, no special abilities. Their only advantage was their stubbornness. The creature will wash out before the year ends, she told her assistant. They always do. Their minds cannot handle the pressure. She turned away from the screen, showing Do-hyun alone in the gardens. Prepare the paperwork for his departure. We might as well be ready. But Vethmara was wrong about Kang Do-hyun. She did not understand humans. None of them did. They saw his soft skin and thought he was fragile. They saw his short life and thought he was insignificant. They saw his quiet manner and thought he was broken. They did not know that humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars. They did not know that humans had climbed out of the mud and reached for the stars through pure stubborn will. They did not know what a human could do when pushed to the edge. Do-hyun looked up at the alien stars through the garden's dome. He missed home. He was alone. He was afraid. But he was not going to give up. He had promised his grandmother he would make her proud. He had promised his sister he would come back with amazing stories. And Kang Do-hyun always kept his promises. He did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. In the hidden parts of the academy, something ancient was stirring. And in the nursery wing, a small Valorian child with curious eyes was about to wander somewhere she should not go. The first chapter of Do-hyun's true story was about to begin. The nursery wing was in the safest part of the academy. Heavy doors and energy shields protected it from any danger. Inside, the children of important officials and diplomats were raised and educated while their parents worked. Most of these children were Valorians, their small crystal bodies still soft and forming, their colors bright and ever-changing. Among them was a 7-year-old girl named Hana. Hana was not like the other Valorian children. While they learned to hide their emotions and control their thoughts, Hana could not stop feeling. Her crystal surface changed colors constantly, showing everything she felt. The teachers called it a problem. They said she needed more discipline. But Hana did not understand why feeling things was bad. She asked too many questions. Why is the sky dark here? Where do the stars come from? What happens when we die? The teachers gave her short answers and told her to focus on her studies. But Hannah's mind was always wandering, always wondering, always searching for something more. The other children avoided her. They said her emotions were too loud, that being near her was uncomfortable. So Hannah spent most of her time alone, exploring the academy's corridors when no one was watching. She had found many secret places, forgotten storage rooms, empty observation decks, maintenance tunnels that twisted through the station's walls. But her favorite discovery was the lower gardens. She found them by accident one day, following a sweet smell through a broken door. The plants inside glowed with soft light, and the air was warm and gentle. It felt like a different world, hidden inside the cold metal station. Hannah came back whenever she could escape her teachers. That was where she first saw the human. He was sitting among the flowers, his back against a tree that glowed soft blue. His eyes were closed, and his face was wet. Hannah had never seen anything like it. Water was coming from his eyes and rolling down his cheeks. She knew from her lessons that humans did this sometimes. It was called crying, and it meant they were sad. She watched him for a long time. His mind was strange to her senses. Valorian thoughts were like crystal patterns, organized and clear. The human's mind was different. It moved and changed constantly, like music or like water. It was chaotic, but there was a beauty in the chaos that Hannah had never felt before. Finally, she stepped out from behind the glowing bushes. "Why are you sad?" The human's eyes opened quickly. He looked at her with surprise, wiping his face with his sleeve. Hannah noticed that his eyes were brown, a color rare among Valorians. They reminded her of the warm stones in the Academy's meditation room. "You can feel that?" he asked. His voice was careful, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Your mind is loud," Hannah said, walking closer, "but not sharp. It is like music." "Why is your music sad?" The human stared at her for a long moment. Then something changed in his face. The corners of his mouth moved upward. Hannah knew this was called a smile, and that humans did it when they felt happy or warm feelings. "I am far from home," he said simply, "and I miss it." "What is miss?" The human tilted his head. "You do not know what missing something feels like?" Hannah thought about it. We are taught not to want things that are not here. Wanting causes pain. "That is a sad way to live," the human said softly. Hannah sat down across from him, pulling her knees to her chest. Her crystal body flickered with curious yellows and interested oranges. "Tell me about your home. Maybe I can understand." So the human began to talk. His name was Kang Do-yun, and he came from a planet called Earth. It was a small world covered mostly in water, with green lands and white ice and brown mountains. He talked about a city called Bizon, where he had grown up. He described the ocean, how it moved and crashed against the shore, how it smelled of salt and life. Hannah had never seen an ocean. The academy had pools for swimming, but they were small and still. She could not imagine water that stretched to the horizon, water that moved by itself. Do-hyun told her about rain. "Water that fell from the sky," he said, "like tears from the clouds." He told her about his grandmother, Yoonji, who grew vegetables in a small garden and made food that tasted like love. He told her about his sister, Yuna, who was 16 and dreamed of becoming a painter. He told her about his parents, who worked hard every day to give their family a good life. As he talked, Hannah felt something strange happening inside her. The Valorians did not tell stories like this. They shared information, facts, data. But Do-hyun was sharing something else. He was sharing feelings. "When you eat the food your grandmother makes," Hannah asked slowly, "how does it make you feel?" Do-hyun smiled again. "Safe," he said. "Like everything will be okay. Like I'm loved and I belong." Hana's crystals shifted to a deep, warm pink. She had never felt safe like that. She had never felt like she belonged. The teachers and other children always made her feel like something was wrong with her, like her feelings were a disease she needed to cure. "Can you tell me more?" she whispered. From that day forward, Hana found Douyin in the gardens whenever she could. She brought 2 other children with her the second time, a boy named Jiwoo and a girl named Minho. They were her only friends in the nursery, other children who felt too much and did not fit in. At first, Jiwoo and Minho were afraid of the human. They had heard the teachers say that humans were primitive and dangerous. But after hearing Douhyun's stories, their fear melted away. He told them about snow, about the feeling of cold flakes landing on your tongue. He told them about music, about how sounds could make you cry or laugh or dance. He told them about birthday parties, where people gathered to celebrate that someone had been born and was loved. A week later, little Sujin joined them. She was only 5 years old, the youngest in the nursery, and she cried every night because she missed her mother. The teachers told her to control herself, that crying was shameful. But when Douyin held her hand and let her cry, when he told her it was okay to miss her mother because that meant she loved her, Sujin finally smiled. The children started calling Douyin their friend. It was a word that Valorians rarely used. They had alliances and partnerships, but friendship was considered a human concept, something emotional and weak. But to Hana and the others, it felt right. Douyin taught them games. Simple human games like hide and seek and tag. The children had never played like this before. Valorian education was serious and structured. There was no running, no laughing, no joy in learning. But in the secret garden, with the glowing plants around them, they were free. He shared his dried persimmons with them. It was a sacrifice, Hana knew. Those persimmons were precious to him, his last connection to his grandmother. But he divided them carefully and gave each child a tiny piece. The taste was strange and sweet. But what Hana remembered most was not the flavor. It was the way Douyin watched them eat, his eyes soft and warm, like seeing them happy made him happy too. "Why do you do this?" Hana asked him one day. "We are not your species. We are not your family." Douyin was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and gently touched her crystal hand. It was warm, his touch, in a way that Valorian contact never was. "On Earth," he said, "we believe that family is not just blood. Family is the people you care about, the people you would protect, the people who make you feel less alone in the universe." Hana's crystals turned a color she had never seen before, something between joy and sadness and hope all mixed together. "You make us feel less alone," she said. Douyin smiled, and his brown eyes were bright. "You do the same for me." None of them knew that their time together was running out. In the deepest part of the academy, in a prison that had held for 300 years, something was waking up. Ancient and terrible, full of hunger and rage. It could feel the children's bright emotions like a beacon in the darkness. And it was starting to move. Deep beneath the academy, in a place that most students did not know existed, there was a prison. It was called Deep Containment, and it had been built 300 years ago. To hold something terrible that the creature inside had no name that any species could speak. The scientists called it the Remnant because it was the last of its kind. It came from the edge of the universe, from a place where the laws of physics broke down and life took shapes that should not exist. The Remnant stood 12 meters tall, a mountain of black chitin and twisted shadow. It had 6 limbs that ended in claws, sharp enough to cut through starship metal. Its body seemed to absorb light, making it hard to look at directly. But its eyes were the worst part. It had 17 of them, scattered across its head in no pattern, each one glowing with a different color. Those eyes could see heat, see movement, see thoughts. When the remnant looked at you, it saw everything you were afraid of. The creature had been captured during the Frontier Wars, when the Confederacy was still young and brave. Thousands of soldiers had died to trap it. The prison built to hold it used technology that no longer existed, built by species that had since gone extinct. Every year, the Academy brought students to look at it through reinforced barriers. It was a lesson, they said, a reminder that the universe held dangers beyond imagination. The remnant had been still for a long time. The energy fields drained its strength, kept its mind cloudy and slow. But it was not dead. It was waiting, and now it felt something that made it stir. Emotions, pure and bright and unshielded. The feelings of children, flooding the telepathic field like light flooding darkness. The remnant had been starving for 3 centuries. It fed on fear and pain and despair. The emotions it felt now were different, sweeter somehow, but they called to it all the same. In the garden, Darheen was teaching the children a song. It was a simple earth song about a little star in the sky. Hana loved it because the melody was like the music she felt in Do-hyun's mind. Sujin sang along in her small voice, her crystals glowing soft pink with happiness. Jiwoo and Minho clapped their hands to the beat, something they had learned from watching Do-hyun. None of them heard the alarms at first. The sound started far away, a low wailing that echoed through the station's corridors. Do-hyun stopped singing and looked up. His face changed, the easy smile disappearing. He had learned to recognize danger in his months at the academy. "What is that?" Jiwoo asked Dot before Do-hyun could answer. The emergency display on the garden wall flickered to life. A Valorian face appeared, crystal features twisted with something Do-hyun had never seen on their kind before. Fear. "All students to safe rooms immediately. This is not a drill. Deep containment breach. Repeat, deep containment breach. All students to safe rooms immediately." The display showed footage from security cameras. Do-hyun felt his heart stop. The remnant was free. The creature moved through the phoned academy's corridors like a nightmare come to life. It was bigger than the footage had shown, bigger than any living thing Do-hyun had ever seen. Its claws tore through walls like paper. Its 17 eyes scanned everything, searching, hunting. Around it, Valorian students collapsed, their crystal bodies going dark as the creature's psychic attack crushed their minds. Thorax warriors charged at it with weapons blazing. The remnant barely slowed. It caught one warrior in its claws and threw him through a bulkhead. The others fell back, their hard shells cracking under the creature's blows. Security systems activated. Energy barriers rose to block the creature's path. The remnant walked through them like they were not there. Whatever technology had held it prisoner for 300 years. It was different from the modern systems. Stronger. Older. The academy had nothing that could stop it. "The nursery wing," the announcement continued, the voice now breaking with panic. "The creature is heading toward the nursery wing. Emergency evacuation in progress. All personnel." The display went dark. Do-hyun looked at the children. 4 small faces stared back at him, their crystals flickering with colors of confusion and growing fear. They did not fully understand what was happening. They were too young. "We need to go," Do-hyun said, keeping his voice steady. "Right now." He took Sujin's hand and started moving toward the garden's exit. The other children followed close behind. Hannah grabbed the back of his shirt, her small fingers tight with fear. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The safe rooms," Do-hyun said. "There are reinforced shelters for emergencies. We need to get there." But as they reached the corridor outside the garden, Do-hyun stopped. The path to the safe rooms went through the main junction. The same junction where, according to the footage he had seen, the creature was heading. He pulled up the emergency map on his communication device. The safe rooms were 3 levels up and 200 meters forward. The creature was somewhere between them and safety. He could hear screaming in the distance, the sound of metal tearing, the roar of something that should not exist. "Is there another way?" Minho asked, her voice shaking. Da-Hyun studied the map. There were service tunnels that ran through the station's walls. Maintenance workers used them to reach broken systems. They were small and cramped, designed for working robots rather than people. But they might be able to get through. The problem was the tunnels were also closer to where the creature was moving. "Okay," Da-Hyun said, making a decision. "We are going to play a game. You know, hide and seek? We are going to be very, very quiet, and we are going to sneak past the monster. Can you do that?" The children nodded, their crystals dimming as they tried to control their fear. Da-Hyun felt a wave of pride for them. They were so young that they were trying to be brave. They moved through the corridors quickly but quietly. Da-Hyun kept the children close, one hand holding Sujin, the other on Ji-Woo's shoulder. Every few steps, he checked the emergency map. The creature was moving erratically, drawn by different groups of students, changing direction as it sensed new prey. They reached a maintenance door, and Da-Hyun pulled it open. The tunnel beyond was dark and narrow. He boosted the children inside one by one, then climbed in after them. "Stay close," he whispered, "and stay quiet." They crawled through the darkness. The tunnel was barely big enough for Do-Hyun's adult body. Metal pressed against his shoulders, and the air was thick and warm. Behind him, he could hear the children breathing, trying not to make sounds. Then they heard it, a scraping sound like claws on metal. It was coming from somewhere ahead, echoing through the tunnels. Do-Hyun stopped. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought it might burst from his chest. He turned off his light and pressed himself against the tunnel wall, motioning for the children to do the same. Silence. Then the scraping again. Closer this time. The tunnel they were in connected to a larger passage up ahead. If the creature was in that passage, they would have to go back. But going back meant running into the destruction behind them. Do-Hyun crawled forward slowly, inch by inch. He reached a junction where their tunnel met the larger passage. Carefully, so carefully, he looked around the corner. The passage was empty. The scraping sound had been something else, maybe debris settling or automated systems failing. Do-Hyun let out a breath he did not know he was holding. "Come on," he whispered. Almost there. They emerged from the tunnels 2 levels up. The safe room was just down the corridor. Do-Hyun could see the heavy doors, still open, waiting for evacuees. A few other students were running toward them. "Go," he told the children. "Run to those doors. I am right behind you." Hana looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." The children ran. Do-Hyun followed, his legs burning from the cramped crawl through the tunnels. 50 meters, 40, 30. And then the wall beside them exploded. The remnant burst through the metal like it was paper. Debris flew everywhere. Do-Hyun threw himself over Sujin, shielding her with his body. He felt something sharp cut his arm, felt the impact of falling metal on his back. When he looked up, the creature was there. It filled the corridor, blocking the path to the safe room. Its 17 eyes focused on them, and Do-Hyun felt its mind pressing against his like a physical weight. It was hungry. It was angry. It wanted to feed. The children screamed, their terror flooding the psychic field. The remnants seemed to grow larger, stronger, drinking in their fear. 20 meters behind them was the garden they had come from. 20 meters ahead was the creature. There was nowhere to run. Do-Hyun stood up slowly, placing himself between the children and the monster. His hands were shaking. His arm was bleeding. Every instinct screamed at him to flee. But behind him, 4 children were crying, and Kang Do-Hyun was the only one who could protect them. The remnant was the most terrifying thing Do-Hyun had ever seen. Up close, It was even worse than the security footage had shown. Its black body seemed to swallow light, making it hard to see where the creature ended and the shadows began. Its 6 limbs filled the corridor, each one thick with muscle and ending in claws that had already torn through metal and flesh. But the worst part was the eyes. 17 of them, glowing different colors, all focused on a small group of children behind him. Do-hyun could feel the creature's mind pressing against his own, trying to break through, trying to see his fears. The children were crying. Sujin had buried her face in Hana's side. Ji-woo and Minho were holding each other, their crystal bodies flickering with pure terror. Their emotions were like a beacon, calling to the creature, feeding it. Do-hyun felt the psychic pressure increase. The remnant was trying to do to him what it had done to the Valorian students in the corridors. It was trying to crush his mind, to break him open and feast on his fear. But something strange happened. The human mind was not like the Valorian mind. It was not crystal, not organized, not clean. It was chaos. A storm of thoughts and memories and feelings all tangled together. The remnant pushed, but there was no structure to break. Its attack scattered through Do-hyun's consciousness like water through sand. It hurt. God, it hurt. Do-hyun felt like his head was going to split open. But he did not collapse. He did not fall. The creature paused. Its eyes blinked in confusion. In that moment of hesitation, something changed in Do-hyun. The fear was still there, burning in his chest, screaming at him to run. But beneath the fear, something else was rising. Something old and powerful, something written into human blood through millions of years of survival. His ancestors had faced predators before. Saber-toothed cats and giant bears and everything else that had tried to eat them. They had survived ice ages and floods and famines. They had watched their children die and gotten up the next day. They had crawled out of the mud, built tools, built cities, built ships that crossed the stars. Humans were not strong like the Thorax. They were not telepathic like the Valorians. They did not have claws or armor or any natural weapons. But they had something else. They had will. Do-hyun looked at the creature blocking their path. It was bigger than him, stronger than him. It could kill him with one swipe of its massive claws. He knew that. Every part of his brain knew that. And he stepped forward anyway. Hey! His voice echoed through the corridor, raw and loud. The remnant actually flinched. It had never heard a sound like that, a human voice full of challenge and defiance. For 300 years, every creature it had encountered had either attacked with weapons or fled in terror. None had simply stood there and screamed at it. You want to hunt something? Do-hyun shouted. Then try me. Behind him, Hana grabbed his arm. Do-hyun, no. You cannot fight it. It will kill you. Do-hyun looked back at her. His face was pale with fear, but his eyes were steady. Take the others, he said quietly. There is a service tunnel 20 meters behind you. Go. We cannot leave you. You can. Do-hyun gently removed her hand from his arm. You will. He looked at the 4 children, memorizing their faces. Hana, brave and curious, who had shown him that he was not alone. Ji-woo, quiet and thoughtful, who asked the best questions. Minho, kind and gentle, who shared her food with anyone who was hungry. And little Sujin, who just wanted her mother, who cried every night because she missed home. They were not his species. They were not his family by blood. But he loved them anyway. Get them out of here, he told Hana. You are the oldest. You are responsible. Hana's crystals were cycling through colors of grief and fear and desperate love. You promised you would come with us. Do-hyun smiled. It was a real smile, the kind he had not shown anyone since leaving Earth. I am right behind you, he said. Now go. He turned back to the creature without waiting to see if they obeyed. The remnant watched this exchange with its 17 eyes. It did not understand what was happening. The small creatures were prey. They should run. But they were crying for the larger creature instead. And the larger creature, the weak one, the soft one, was not running at all. Do-hyun picked up a piece of debris from the floor. It was a metal strut, about 1 meter long, broken from the wall when the creature burst through. It would do nothing against the remnant's armor. He knew that. He picked it up anyway. "Come on then," he said, his voice steady despite the fear. "Let us see what you have got." The remnant moved. It was fast, faster than anything that Sai should be. One clawed limb swept toward Do-hyun like a blade. He dove to the side, felt the wind of its passage, heard the metal floor tear where he had been standing. He came up swinging and hit the creature's leg with all his strength. The impact nearly broke his arms. The strut rang like a bell and bounced off the creature's chitin without leaving a mark. But the remnant paused again, confused. No creature had ever hit back before. Behind Do-hyun, he heard the children running. The sound of their small feet on the metal floor was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. They were getting away. They were going to be safe. The remnant tried to go around him, drawn by the fading emotions of the fleeing children. Do-hyun threw himself in front of it again. "I am your opponent," he shouted. "You do not get to ignore me." The creature's attention snapped back to him. Its mind pushed against his again, harder this time, filling his head with visions of terror. He saw Earth burning. He saw his family dying. He saw himself alone in the darkness forever. Do-hyun gritted his teeth and swung again. The strut hit one of the creature's eyes. The eye did not break, but the remnant made a sound, a screech that vibrated through the air. It was angry now. Really angry. A claw caught Do-hyun in the chest and sent him flying. He crashed into the wall with enough force to crack the metal behind him. He felt ribs break, felt blood fill his mouth, felt something tear in his shoulder. He got up. The creature hit him again. This time, he managed to partly dodge, but the blow still sent him spinning. His vision went white with pain. His legs would not hold him. He got up. The remnant hit him a third time, a fourth, a fifth. Each blow broke something new. Each impact pushed him further into the darkness. His body screamed for him to stop, to fall, to let the monster pass. But every time he fell, he saw the children. He saw Hannah's curious eyes. He saw Sujin's small hand in his. And he got up again. The remnant stopped. It stood over the broken human, claws raised for the killing blow. This creature was nothing. It was soft and weak and should have died from the first hit. But it kept standing. It kept putting itself between the remnant and its prey. Why? The creature had no concept of sacrifice. It came from a place where survival was everything, where the strong ate the weak without thought or mercy. In 300 years of captivity, it had seen hundreds of species. All of them ran. All of them fought to save themselves. None of them had done this. Do-hyun looked up at the monster through swollen eyes. Blood covered his face. He could not feel his left arm anymore. Something was broken inside him, something important. But he was still standing. "You are not getting past me," he whispered. "Not while I am still breathing." The remnant's 17 eyes blinked. In the depths of its ancient mind, something shifted. And then it heard new sounds. Small footsteps coming back down the corridor. The children had not left. Hannah stood in front of the others, her small crystal body flickering with colors no one had ever seen before. "We are not leaving him," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "He is our friend." Jiwoo and Minho stood behind her, holding hands. Little Sujin was crying, but she had come back too. They had run to the service tunnel like Do-hyun told them. They had almost escaped, But then Hannah had stopped. She had looked at the others and said 2 words. He stayed. And they had come back. The remnant looked at the broken human, still trying to stand, still trying to protect. It looked at the children, small and helpless, refusing to abandon their protector. Something was happening that it did not understand. Something it had never seen in all its centuries of existence. And for the first time in 300 years, the remnant was not hungry anymore. He was on his knees now, unable to stand anymore. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the metal floor, making small pools around him. His body was broken in more places than he could count. But his eyes were still open, and they were fixed on the children behind him. The remnant stood motionless. Its 17 eyes moved back and forth between the dying human and the small crystals that had returned. The creature's claws were still raised, ready to strike. But the strike did not come. Something was different. In the creature's ancient mind, memory stirred. Long ago, before its capture, before its imprisonment, the remnant had been something else. It had been part of a colony, one of many of its kind. They had lived on the edge of the universe in the darkness between stars, feeding on the energy of dying suns. And there had been young ones. The remnant had not thought about that for 300 years. The pain of loss of seeing its colony destroyed had been too great. It had buried those memories deep, replacing them with hunger and rage. But now, looking at the small crystals clustered around the broken human, something broke through. The children were afraid. Yes, but not only afraid. They were also determined. They were also brave. They had come back for their protector. Hannah stepped forward, putting herself between Do-hyun and the monster. Her small body was shaking, her crystals flickering with terror. But she did not run. "Please," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Do not hurt him anymore. He was just protecting us. He is good." The remnant's eyes focused on her. Its mind reached out, not to attack, but to understand. It touched Hannah's thoughts gently, reading the emotions there. Love, that was what it found. Love for the broken human on the floor. Love for the other children behind her. Love that was bigger than fear, stronger than the instinct to survive. The creature had forgotten what love felt like. Behind Hannah, Jiwoo and Minho knelt beside Do-hyun. They were crying, their tears falling on his battered face. Minho was trying to stop the bleeding from his arm with her small hands. Jiwoo was whispering to him, telling him to hold on, telling him help was coming. Little Sujin walked forward until she was standing right in front of the monster. She was only 5 years old. She should have been the most afraid of all of them. But instead, she looked up at the remnant with wide, curious eyes. "Are you lonely?" she asked. The question hit the creature like a physical blow. For a long moment, it did not move. Then, slowly, impossibly, the remnant lowered its claws. Yes, it was lonely. It had been lonely for 300 years, locked in darkness, fed by fear and hate. It had forgotten there was anything else. It had forgotten that warmth existed, that gentleness existed, that creatures could choose something other than destruction. The human had shown it something new, a creature that would sacrifice itself for others, a being that kept standing long after it should have fallen, not because it wanted to live, but because it wanted others to live. And the children had shown it something else. Love that crossed species. Loyalty that overcame fear. The choice to come back, to face death, rather than abandon a friend. The remnant took a step backward, then another. Its massive form folded into itself, the shadows around it softening. It was not attacking anymore. It was not hunting. It was just looking at them with its 17 eyes. And somewhere deep in those alien depths, there was something that might have been wonder. Security forces burst into the corridor moments later. Director Vethmara led them, her crystal body blazing with authority and power. Thorax warriors surrounded the remnant, weapons pointed at its heart. Valorian telepaths tried to push into its mind, to force it back into submission. But the creature did not fight them. It let them lead it away. As it passed the children, it paused one last time. Its mind brushed against theirs, gentle and sad, sharing something that felt like gratitude. Then it was gone. Do-hyun woke up 3 weeks later in the Academy's medical center. His body was wrapped in bandages and connected to machines. Doctors from 6 different species had worked on him, repairing damage that should have been fatal. They told him later that he had died twice on the operating table. Both times, they brought him back. The first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was Hana's face. She was sitting beside his bed, her small hand holding his. Her crystals were glowing a warm, gentle gold that he had never seen before. Behind her, Jiwo and Minho were asleep in chairs. Sujin was curled up at the foot of his bed like a cat. "You are awake," Hana said, her voice thick with emotion. "We were so scared." Do-hyun tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. A nurse appeared and gave him water through a straw. The cool liquid was the best thing he had ever tasted. "The creature," he managed finally. "What happened?" "It stopped," Hana said. "It just stopped. It let the security people take it away. No one knows why. But Hana knew why. She had felt it when the monster's mind touched hers. She had felt its loneliness, its confusion, its slow awakening to something it had forgotten. The remnant had seen something in them, in Do-hyun and the children, that had changed it. For the first time in 300 years, it had seen love. The news spread through the academy like fire. The human had faced the remnant and survived. Not just survived, but stopped it. Scientists could not explain what had happened. The creature should have killed him instantly. It should have hunted down the children. Instead, it had watched a broken human refuse to fall, watched children refuse to abandon him, and something in its ancient mind had shifted. Students who had ignored Do-hyun before now looked at him with new eyes. The Valorians, who had thought humans were primitive, began to question their assumptions. The Thorax, who had seen humans as prey, started to wonder if they had missed something important. Director Vethmara visited him in the medical center. She stood at the foot of his bed, her purple crystals shimmering with complicated emotions. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "You could have run. You could have left the children and saved yourself. Any logical being would have." Do-hyun looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Hana, still holding his hand. "Because they needed me," he said simply. "Because protecting people is what humans do. Even children of another species. Beings you have no genetic connection to." Do-hyun smiled, and even through the bandages and bruises, it was warm. "Family is not about genetics," he said. "It is about who you are willing to die for." Vethmara was silent for a long time. Then she did something no Valorian had ever done to a human. She bowed her head in respect. "I was wrong about your species," she said quietly. "We all were." The recovery took months. Do-hyun had to learn to walk again, learn to use his arm again, learn to do everything his broken body had forgotten. It was hard work, painful work, frustrating work. But he was never alone. The children came every day. Hana brought him books and read to him when his eyes were too tired. Jiwoo asked him questions about Earth and listened carefully to every answer. Minho brought him food from the cafeteria and insisted he eat everything. Sujin just held his hand and smiled. Other visitors came too. Students who had never spoken to him before stopped by to say thank you. Professor Keth brought him advanced study materials and told him his grades would not suffer. Even a few thorax warriors came, standing awkwardly in the doorway, offering gruff words of respect. On the day Do-yoon was released from medical care, there was a ceremony in the academy's great hall. Every student, every teacher, every official was there. Director Vethmara stood at the podium, and for the first time in academy history, she spoke about a human with honor. "Today we recognize Kang Do-yoon of Earth," she said. "Not because he is strong, not because he's powerful, but because he showed us something we had forgotten. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. That love knows no species. That the smallest beings can teach us the greatest lessons." She placed a medal around his neck, the highest honor the Academy could give. "The Confederacy welcomes humanity," she said. "Not as primitives to be tolerated, but as equals to be respected. We have much to learn from each other." After the ceremony, Do-hyun walked to the lower gardens with the children. The glowing plants were still there, still beautiful, still peaceful. They sat among the flowers like they had so many times before. "Are you going to leave now?" Sujin asked, her voice small. "Are you going back to Earth?" Do-hyun pulled her into his lap. "Someday," he said. "But not yet. I have too many stories still to tell you." Hana leaned against his shoulder. "Tell us about the ocean again," she said. "About the waves and the salt and the sand." So Do-yoon talked about Earth, about his grandmother Yoonji and his sister Yuna, about rain and snow and summer nights, about all the things that made humans human, the love and the loss and the stubborn refusal to give up. And in the gardens of an alien academy far from Earth, surrounded by children of crystal and light, Kang Do-hyun finally felt like he was home. Far below, in a new containment facility built just for it, the remnant sat in darkness. But it was not hungry anymore. It was remembering. It remembered its own young, lost so long ago. It remembered warmth and connection and love. It remembered what it felt like to protect something precious. And sometimes, when the children passed near its prison on their way to their lessons, it felt their bright emotions through the walls. It did not reach,